Hello and welcome to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for today's event, and I know you're here to listen to the amazing talks that we have lined up for you, but I want to give you a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these events. So at UXDX, our mission is to help teams shift from building software using waterfall projects to empowered autonomous product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because in a high change environment, that's when so in a high change environment, we have to quickly iterate and move from kind of working in waterfall to autonomous teams. Apologies, there was a distraction there. But as the talks go on, hopefully you'll ask some questions and we'll put those questions to the speakers. If we don't have time to get through all of the questions, we have the Ask the Speakers channel in our UXDX community Slack group. So apologies about the slight distraction there. But that's enough of an introduction. That's why we're hosting these events. So up first, we have Prathima, who will be talking about the deep digital divide. Can design bridge it? So welcome, Prathima.
Thank you, Rory, for the introduction. And it's always okay to have those disturbances. They are part of our lives. So yeah, let me share my screen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to UXDX presentation. The topic that I would like to speak about today is the digital divide. And, let's dig in deep. The topic is deep digital divide, can design bridge it? By the way, I'm Prathima Inolu. I'm the chief designer and co-founder of Divami Design Labs. We are from India, and we primarily focus on SaaS platforms and deep tech, health tech, fintech platforms. We design and do front-end development for these. Now, without delay, let's dig in. The digital divide. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard the word digital divide, and most of you would know what it is. Generally, the understanding of digital divide is, is limited to, not having access to internet or not having access to devices like smartphones, tablets, and computers. Let's go a little bit beyond this. But are all the people having access to internet and having access to smartphones, computers, tablets, actually using the internet like they can or they should probably for saving time, for convenience and saving money? Is that really happening? Probably not. There are a lot of people out there in the world who still have access to internet, who have access to smartphones or tablets, but they hardly use it. The primary focus for them is primarily to use it for communication with probably their families or for entertainment. Now, should we consider these people as part of the segment where they're divided digitally? Probably yes, because probably they're not divided by hardware or internet access, but they definitely are divided in terms of user experience and how they consume information or use internet or the devices. Now, let's just decode the divide a little bit more. Why is the digital divide there in terms of usage, right? Is it because of lack of digital literacy? I think that is one of the major reasons as of today that a lot of people out there do not use their smartphones, laptops, or the tablets as they probably could, right? Why? There is a lot of fear, a lot of discomfort among people to be using these devices, for many reasons, right? They are not yet comfortable with it, or we as designers have not yet made them comfortable using all these applications that exist out there. Fear in turn boils down to not having trust, which again why don't they trust, right? They do not probably trust using the smartphones or the digital world yet, probably because they still think they still think the old ways are the better ways. They still prefer the traditional ways. Is it because the digital platforms are not enabling them? Probably they are, but maybe we are not yet showing the value to them. We are not yet making them comfortable on these applications. So, one of the key reasons a lot of people, when we did talk to them as to why they are not yet comfortable using their applications for paying or applications for using for their work, they clearly said that they actually are not comfortable using them because they don't know how to use them. The apps are not yet made for them. This is one of the key reasons that they said that they would rather do things the traditional way because they don't yet, while they see value, some of them, while they see value, they don't yet know how to use them. So the apps have not built for them is one of the key reasons that a lot of people did mention. Apart from that, what other things could be the reasons? The physical age, definitely, and also having limited exposure, which in turn is we are not actually stepping into their world to help them out, to make them comfortable in the digital world. So if we have to dig a little more deeper into the factors that are impacting the divide, right? One is demographics, geographics. We probably are not understanding the complete needs and pain points. Apart from that, there are a few more things that definitely add a lot of value, which is the psychometrics part of it. We necessarily are not understanding them as to what their requirements are. What is their day like? When do they feel comfortable using the smartphone? Somebody is comfortable probably using it for communication. I've seen a lot of them do video calls. They are very comfortable with messaging, probably because even when the smartphones didn't exist, the traditional small phones without the internet access still had SMS, and they were still able to message, and they find it still comfortable to be messaging. So probably adaptation to any applications related to messaging like WhatsApp and stuff, they're easily able to adapt to it. For the video calling, they're very comfortable, probably because it was an extension of their usual calling, and they love to see their loved ones or over the video rather than just speak to them on calls. So probably that's where they were able to adapt to those kind of applications quite easily. But when it comes to other applications, especially where the money is involved, like the bank applications, the trust factor is not there. It is not only because that they have limited access to the machines, but also that they have faced certain issues, or they hear a lot of things happening around the world where people lost their money. People were asked to share their passwords, and they did, and they lost their money. So there is a lot of things involved. So the past experiences or the information that we carry along with us definitely defines our usage patterns. So we absolutely have to focus on the psychometrics. We need to understand where they are from, what their experiences are, how they have how they lead their day, what makes them anxious, what makes them happy, what makes them comfortable. These are the things that we definitely need to understand. Along with it, firmographics. This is something we definitely have to focus on, especially when we are designing applications that they can use at work. I'll dig in a little more into it a little later, but for working population, especially the blue-collared employees, we need to figure out how to make them comfortable by enabling them, empowering them with the digital applications. Market influence, of course, the market influence is always there. It is all about what the world is doing around them. And if we are able to help them, guide them in the right manner, and show them the value of using the digital applications, I think that adoption would be a lot faster. So who are the main people or the personas that are, impacted by the divide or part of this big division, right? People who are tech savvy, who are very comfortable using applications, and there are people who are not at all comfortable using the applications. Senior citizens, again, this is not generalization, but having said that, holistically, when you observe, throughout the world, irrespective of their geography, whether they come from, whether they are in US or whether they are in India or Thailand, senior citizens have not used digital devices for a very long time. They started adopting to them only about 10, 15 years ago. So they necessarily have not been using them all their life. It is only once they have, after their middle age or a little after their 50s and 60s that they started using them. And they find it extremely hard to interact with the digital devices. The reason being, a device, end of the day, does not personify a person. They're more comfortable talking to people, getting work done through people rather than through devices. They enjoy that interaction with the devices. Blue collar workers. This is a classic example. Usually, yes, their educational background does impact. Again, there are always exceptions. There are highly educated people who are also who are blue collared employees. But having said that, they come from an educational background where they're not necessarily introduced to technology earlier, and also they do not have access to a lot of things. And the work that they do, necessarily people have not focused, at least the digital world has not focused on them in the last 10, 15 years. It is only now that the world is shifting, where we are talking about including everyone into this digital space, and how do we make everyone's life easy. So during the initial years of the boom of the digital technologies, or the boom of internet, we highly focused on people who were tech savvy, people who had absolutely access to computer gadgets, and enabled them and empowered them. So but now things are changing, and pretty soon I think we will be there where we would be able to include everybody around the world. Homemakers, absolutely. I mean, this, I don't have to speak probably about their financial background. And underdeveloped countries, to begin with, having access to these gadgets itself is limited in underdeveloped countries, not everywhere, but yes. Now, if you see the penetration of smartphones in third world countries, it's much faster than actually in US. So there are, there are reports which show either way, but then definitely underdeveloped countries, people still are not tech savvy, or they're not comfortable using technology yet. So how do we build this gap? How do we bridge this divide? So, it is extremely important for us to win the trust of people. It is extremely important to make them comfortable on the applications, the digital applications. It is extremely important to make people feel like, the app is made for them. So, for that reason, we actually have to understand all of these people. We need to understand what bothers them, what doesn't bother them. Most of them, because they may not come from a rich educational background, it is very important for us to not bombard them with a lot of information. We need to adapt to visualizations. People usually are very comfortable with visualizations than an overload of information. So we have to figure out how to reduce this cognitive overload, make them feel comfortable, give them guided flows, help them easily discover things. These are very, very, very crucial to bridge this gap. Now, the time to perform a task, so actually about a few days back, I was listening to this conversation where people were saying that people these days, at least the attention span of people has gone down, irrespective of technology or non-technology. It's just that the penetration of television, the penetration of a lot of things. I mean, they're not as peaceful as we used to be probably, but the study shows that people focus is less than 8.3 seconds. I believe it's goldfish focuses about 9 seconds. I was reading it this somewhere, and we have gone down to that level. So what they say is focus, give clarity on what they are here to do, then help them perform the action and show them the output. Be simple, be clear in what is expected, just do it, and help them move away from it. So the time to task is extremely, extremely important, while at the same time maintaining, keeping them engaged all along. Contextualization. So usually, right, at any given point when we are reading something or when we are performing an action, from there each of us as humans would have multiple questions for which we would probably need answers, or our journeys are different, and the chances of them being different are extremely high. So we definitely have to understand from here where would they go from here, and include those possible actions everywhere, and that is what we are calling as contextualization. Inclusion and consistency. When we are designing an application, we absolutely have to make sure the application, while it is inclusive in its nature, it also is consistent across to avoid surprises. When the patterns are repeating, when we are trying to do the same thing, the familiarity makes people comfortable, it builds the trust of the people, and they hang in there to finish their work. Emotional innovation. Usually, when we are designing, we usually think of demographics, geographics, what are the needs and what are the pain points. But often we keep their emotions in check. And this is a classic example I try to give everywhere, which is, Uber. When somebody is using an Uber, they could either be going to celebrate something, or they could be going to an emergency, or in a hospital, right? So how Uber, while performing the workflow of Uber, has to consider all kinds of emotions. It has to consider that people could be using their workflow, or people could be trying to book a cab in any kind of emotion, right? So we need to make sure that we are handling all kinds of emotions fairly well. So we need to make people comfortable. If the cab is getting delayed, we need to figure out how to use the tone of the application, what language we are using. We should be extremely careful what visualizations we are using. So for example, if somebody is in an emergency and they're trying to book a cab and they found a cab, it can't be like, hooray, you found a cab, right? It just doesn't work. At the same time, if somebody is going somewhere to celebrate, we can't use a normal tone. So you need to find a good balance, and for that we absolutely, absolutely have to consider the emotions of the people, the emotional state of the people, not just their user needs and the pain points. Along with it, intellectual innovation is also equally important. What I mean by that is, we as humans, we shift between emotional space to intellectual space. When we are in intellectual space, we are trying to perform a task, finish a task. When we are in an emotional state, our logic kind of, it kind of degrades in a sense. So we need to figure out how to balance both intellectual, persona part of it, as well as the emotions of the users. Education, value delivery, we did discuss this. Trust, security, trust. I mean, end of the day, our applications have to be designed in such a way that we win the trust, and the personas, we definitely have to keep them in mind while we are trying to win their trust. And the voice for accessibility is also extremely crucial. So one of the key things that I believe could make a huge difference to bridge this divide is voice enablement, and support all the possible languages, because not all people are comfortable with English, and not all people are comfortable writing and typing. So if we could enable voice, I think we will be able to take it to the next level. I'll just take a simple case study. In fact, we have been working on a couple of projects. One is in the manufacturing industry. We have been working with a SaaS platform where we have been helping them. The platform, the USP of the platform is to provide analytics as well as the workflow management on the floor for for the manufacturing industry. So what is required here is how do we increase the growth of the manufacturing lines, and how do we increase the efficiency, and how do we make people more efficient, right? But even to do that, we need to be able to track every detail. And in order to track every detail, we need the employees in most of the manufacturing industries are are blue collared employees, and they are not tech savvy. They do not like using digital applications. They do not like using the phones or the tablets. They prefer still pen and paper. They prefer writing everything. But because of that, there is a lot of gap in terms of growth, because end of the day, in a manufacturing unit, there are only certain lines there, and you can grow only by increasing the efficiency of these lines. When I say line, it is the manufacturing, for example, of a bolt. There is a certain steps. It's a sequence of 7 steps, and in the sequence of 7 steps, you have to use that line. Only by making processes efficient is the only way we can increase the growth and efficiency, and in turn the revenue of this of the manufacturing industry, or of that particular company, right? So what did we do there? We went with a very unique approach where, we tried giving them instant gratification, and we actually made the application, the digital application for these blue collared employees, so simple, so easy to use, that it was just a set of 5 questions or 10 questions where they have to just touch and touch, and it is done. Nowhere we used forms, nowhere we used a lot of information, nowhere we used a lot of input taking. And pretty much anywhere they needed help, we gave them the guided flows. It was like one step, click, second step, click, third step, click, boom, you're done, and that's it. So they found that this is a lot easier than using the old pen and paper way and submitting the paper, and if it is lost. So they understand the value of it, and they really appreciated it. So the minimalistic design and the simple workflows paid off in this particular case. And the guided flows, we never showed all the information in one shot. We were taking them step by step, and that absolutely helped. The UI designs also helped, because it was for the manufacturing industry in India, and especially for blue collared employees. The culture of India mattered there, so we used very bright colors to make them feel at home. We also used local languages wherever applicable for help, as well as for the labels and stuff. And the visualizations were all Indian, where the infographics that we used were all Indian based, so they felt comfortable being on the application. I think, Rory, I finished it in time. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that talk. I really enjoyed it. There is always sometimes when you're working in tech, you just kind of forget that there are other people who aren't as kind of used to it and digital native, as we say.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. So if anybody has any questions, please do post them either on the chat on UXDX or on YouTube, LinkedIn, whichever platform you're watching on, and we'll put those questions through to Prathima. But I'm going to start off with a question that I always kind of struggle with, and just wondering on your context or your opinion on it. When you make it super simple, as you were describing, and like there's a reason for that, is to make it very easy for people to use. There's sometimes a balance between, like, let's say a power user and you're slowing them down. Like, so somebody who really knows how to use it, how do you get that balance between making it easy for the people who aren't very savvy, but also enabling somebody who is savvy, not frustrating them with going too slow?
Rory, so first of all, we need to create personas, right? We need to understand the SaaS platform that I was talking about, it is being used in a manufacturing industry, right? And in the manufacturing industry, there is an employee on the line trying to, check the quality of each and every nut. And there are employees who are trying to, separate all the bolts and nuts, right? For example, and then they have a supervisor on top of them. Then the supervisor has a manager. The supervisor is typically responsible for one or more lines of manufacturing. The supervisor reports to a manager who is responsible for a floor. The manager and so on, right, till the CXO level. So when we are designing, we have to understand what exactly do they want on this application. Be precise, to the point. Now, the person who is on the line and trying to do their work, they're only interested in finishing of their work, right? And they want to, click and say, hey, I'm done with my work. Everything looks good. Or, hey, I found a small issue here. Report the issue and, put that bolt away probably. So all they need is that. Whereas the supervisor, he needs to understand what is the efficiency of each person on this line. If there are 7 steps, there are 7 people on this line, right? He needs to understand, are all of them performing efficiently? They also need some amount of analytics where they can compare who is slow, who is fast, what can I do. Apart from people information, he also needs to understand what could be the possible repairs that are coming up on this line. Like, the machines, they need to maintain the machines. When is the downtime coming up? Whereas the floor manager is answerable for, what is the productivity on the floor for a week or so on, right? When we consider all of them, the design for the supervisor definitely is not going to be click, click, click. He, in fact, needs drill downs into the graphs. He needs to understand, but not as much, right? Because he's also probably only, he just finished his, not even undergraduation, probably just schooling. And there's only so much he can absorb. So we need to literally make it very clear to him, draw conclusions for him, state that, and only give him additional information on demand. So you can say, hey, today the performance of 3 people is down than the usual, usual efficiency. Do you want to know why? Click on it and then show the details to him, right? So on demand is one way of solving that problem. And if you go to the CXO level, they are interested in what is the revenue I'm making this month. Can I meet my numbers? So that's at a different ballgame. So personas matter. What they need on the application matters. Sometimes, you need to give them information, but probably on demand. And then, give them a guided flow to take them where they want to go.
Great, thank you. I just noticed there were some questions coming in there. So Dia has asked about balancing the advanced and basic users, which I think you answered, as well as how you identify the personas. So you could do a very role-based identification there. But what I might do, we're out of time now, but what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste those questions in, because we have another one from Ujwal as well. I'll paste those into the UXDX Slack group, and I'll invite Prathima to come and answer those questions there. So thank you very much, Prathima, for sharing your insights.
Thank you. Thank you, Rory.
Excellent. So up next, we have Amogh, who will be talking about the classic lies in product. So this is a hopefully an entertaining talk coming up soon. So hi, Amogh. Welcome.
Hey. Well, hopefully we'll live up to that introduction. Yeah, hopefully it's entertaining. Cool.
If you want to share your screen, I'll enable that now.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So over to you. Thank you.
Sweet. So yeah, hey everyone, my name's Amogh. I was a product manager at Intercom for a few years and at Atlassian for a few, and now I'm working on eesel in startup land, so sort of do my own thing now. And today we're going to be talking about the classic lies in product. So, when it comes to learning anything new, our brains can only sort of cope with so much at once. And so one-on-one concepts are usually taught in a pretty black and white way. That makes sense, right? They're taught in a way that, this is right and this is wrong and this is what you should always do and this is what you should never do. And of course, as it always goes, the real world is a lot more nuanced than this black and white. And in practice, we actually have to deal with a lot of gray. And so in this talk, I'm hoping to cover a few classic 101 concepts and how they can actually sometimes misguide us if we're not too nuanced in how we apply them. Cool. So let's get started. So of course, saying no is a classic 101 PM learning. We need to say no to bring focus on what we're building. It's how we avoid ending up with a hodgepodge of product strategy. There's plenty of Steve Jobs quotes to be thrown around here about how it's all about the things that you're saying no to, not just the things that you're saying yes to, and so on. So, obviously there's there's a lot of truth to this. In fact, you do need to say no to bring focus, but I would sort of go as far as to say, hey, actually, let's try to say yes before we say no. Now, why am I suggesting that? So whenever a new idea comes to us, from a customer, from sales, or from any other teammate, it really doesn't feel fair to default to no, right? We have so much inertia to keep things as they are, and a new idea is almost never really going to be formed enough to have immediate sway. And so instead, it's actually fairer to first try build with a yes whenever the new idea comes, and find all the ways that the idea could work, not just all the ways it can't. Now, this is hard, right? Unlike an easy deflection with a no, yes requires us to actively listen. It actually requires us to empathize. It requires us to pause and try and understand why this person is actually saying this in the first place. And it's just generally much harder to do. And it's probably why we default to no. But it's really important to pause and say yes, to explore this, because that's actually ultimately how we create empowered product teams. It's how we create people outside of product even feeling empowered to influence the product. And this is sort of how we can go from rough, crazy ideas to good, crazy ideas. And it's kind of how we can discover those gems. So, a nice anecdote to point to here is this talk I came across from, or not even a talk, a Loom recording, I should say, I came across from Pat Grady. He's a partner at Sequoia Capital. And he talks about how when he got into venture capital, his modus operandi when he was super new to all this was, hey, a new deal has come along. What are all the things that are wrong with this? Here's something that's flawed about this. Here's another thing that's flawed about this. Here's another thing that's flawed about this. And he's come to realize that actually a big part of his job is to actually find what's right. It's to go, despite all of these flaws, this thing over here that is potentially right, or could go right for this company, is giving me enough conviction to make the decision to invest. And I really think this sort of touches on what I'm getting at here really well. Of course, product management and venture capital aren't exactly the same, but I think ultimately the analogy sort of holds well. We should try to say yes before we say no. I'll share a story from my personal experience where I had to apply this nuanced PM102 lesson. So, like I said, I'm building eesel right now. We started this sort of coming from a pain that we felt ourselves. So I was a product manager, like I said, at Intercom at the time, and I was struggling to find documents that I needed to get my job done. Things were spread across all these different applications, and it was just struggle to find the links I needed to do my job. And I thought, okay, well, I can't be the only one who feels this problem. I think there's an interesting business opportunity here. And so that's how we got started on solving this. And we thought, okay, well, the nicest way the most intuitive way to solve this would be to plug into all your different work applications using their APIs, right? Let's plug into Google Docs and Google Slides and Figma and Coda and whatever, and index all of those contents, the content in those different apps using their APIs, and then give you a nice little search across all of these apps in one place. And we were pretty deep in this. So we started thinking about this API approach, and we were, pretty much trying to figure out how we can do this with low latency, and how do we make this feel super responsive, and how are we going to plug into different apps and APIs and all that. And sort of deep into this way of thinking, when we had a lot of inertia, one of the colleagues suggested using browser history potentially. So hang on, like instead of using APIs, what if we used people's browser history to infer all their different document links, the Notion doc that you have and the Google Docs link that you have and so on. Now, just at face value, that's bizarre, right? It's a really unusual thing to suggest here. What about all of the things outside of the browser? I've got maybe some local apps that I'm using that's not going to be in my browser history. What about things that I haven't seen before? Only the things that I have seen are obviously going to be inside my browser history. Anything to do with browser history just generally feels a bit invasive, so that's a bit scary. It's just immediately kind of awkward to even think about building an application on your browser history. And it also doesn't really feel as powerful as APIs, right? APIs are literally that thing applications have built to interface with them, right? It's in the name. And why would we not use that? Like, why would we, as eesel, not plug into these applications by using exactly the thing that they have built to interface with them? So it's just a very, very counterintuitive suggestion. But this is where we sort of paused and we tried to say yes. We tried to figure out all the ways maybe this wasn't a crazy idea. And one thing we came to realize is that, well, whatever eesel is going to be, well, it's just going to be a better version of this, right? Right now, this is kind of where I'm finding the things that I need to do my job usually. I just type a bunch of keywords in the address bar on Chrome, and if I'm lucky with the right keywords, I get it right away. Or sometimes it's not there, and I have to try a few different keywords, and inevitably I end up pinging people on Slack or MS Teams if you use that. But that's sort of where I'm finding links today. And when we started to reflect on that a bit more, we came to realize a few different things. Actually, most of the time, we're working inside the browser. So, all this non-browser stuff, well, most of the time, like I'm generally just working inside the browser, so that's actually not a big deal. And most of the time, I'm actually just trying to find things that I've seen before. It's very rare that I'm trying to do totally greenfield exploratory research. Usually, I'm just trying to go, hey, yesterday's meeting notes or that slide deck that I saw last week, things like that. And we realized that actually working fully locally is possible if we're inside the browser, because if we're inside the browser, we're not plugging in with any APIs or anything, and we're just using a browser history. We can actually store everything locally, and that's actually more private and more secure than APIs, and it's actually even faster as well because everything is local. And also, sure, we don't have the power of APIs, but actually we don't really need that power. And also, it gives us power in other ways. There's potential to maybe interact with the web page and take actions for internal tools, and even actions that maybe aren't supported with an API. So, this is sort of countering all of the initial concerns that we have. And then in addition to that, we discovered more interesting things on top, like, actually, this approach, a browser-based approach, will work with anything inside the browser, even, like I said, your company internal tools, a shiny new app on product time, whatever app inside the browser, it'll work with it, even if it doesn't have APIs. And the other interesting thing is that it's also going to be a lot easier to maintain. We don't have to deal with crazy API data ingestion magic. Actually, it'll just be a lot more straightforward to build. And this is sort of where I'm so glad we paused to say yes, and we didn't default to no. Because it certainly wasn't intuitive to do that, but that's exactly the approach we ended up taking now, this browser-based approach, and that's what we have today. So this is what it looks like. You can search across your different apps, and this is all an integration with all these different apps without an API. So it was certainly a case where we went from rough, crazy idea to becoming to finding, in some ways, a crazy good idea that's ultimately become a key foundation for this company. And not only this company, it's interesting to note that this even inspired others. So there was a Y Combinator company called Station, and $4 million in, more than 3 years of work with several teammates, and 600 API integrations later, they pivoted to using the browser history, much like us. So they pivoted from their API-based approach to a browser history approach. And so this is really, I would say, one of those cases where this decision we made was a very high leverage decision. It saved us a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of hassle, and we only discovered it because we paused and sort of said yes to a kind of seemingly bizarre idea. And so, the key takeaway here is to really challenge yourself to say yes, even if it's for a little bit before you say no. Obviously, you're not going to spend hours and hours of thought on every trickle of idea that you stumble on, but you need to apply some judgment here. But the key thing is really to try say yes, even if it's just for a little bit. Now, onto another classic 101 principle. Product managers, we start with the problem, right? We like to end or throw in a lot of conversations, what problem does this really solve? We like to sort of try to bring it back to the broader picture, and that's fair. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but the point I'm trying to make is that actually sometimes, just sometimes, it's okay to start with the solution. It's actually okay to get inspired by some cool new tech that you've encountered. Maybe GPT seems to be all the craze now. It's okay to get inspired by some strategic opportunity that you're seeing based on the market or based on your existing product offerings. These are the wouldn't it be cool if ideas, and they sort of need space to grow. They can take you places linear thinking from problem to design can't, and we shouldn't feel the need to abruptly cut any sort of discussion in the solution space just because we want to be purely in this first principles problem first way of working. And this doesn't mean, of course, that you never come back to the problem. My point is just that it's okay to let your mind wander a little bit. And so, back to story time. 2001 Space Odyssey, someone watched that in Poland and thought, okay, this is pretty cool. This voice controlled stuff. They built something called Ivona. that was trying to do these kinds of things, voice-controlled devices. Amazon came along and acquired it and made that into the Echo. And then the Echo is sort of what inspired someone alongside Star Trek inside Amazon, who then went, actually, yeah, maybe this should be for more than just music, and this should be for everything. And that's sort of how Alexa came about. So, of course, along this journey, there were many people who were many in time, I'm sure, figuring out problems that this would be solving. But ultimately, the origins of this were really not problems. In some ways, it was really inspired by sci-fi to start with, which in some ways is essentially starting from a solution. Now, I think that's a great example. Another example is a personal anecdote. So this easel thing that that we ended up building now, it's in the new tab. You can search across apps. It is going great, and it was going great at the time as well. And we thought, okay, what if there's a way to create new documents from this new tab as well? It was totally just an idea that we had in one of our casual coffee chats, and we thought, oh yeah, this is interesting. What if we could build some kind of automation engine inside eesel to take actions for a particular app? It just felt very intuitive, and really it was an engineering inspired idea. And we did some light research on the problem to figure it out, to really get crisp on the problem, and then we ended up building it. And the cool thing to note is that there are at least some people now who find this idea of commands, a way to take actions from eesel, actually more valuable than the core use case of eesel, of finding documents by search. So I think it's another example of a place where I don't think problem first approach would have necessarily gotten us there, but letting our creativity wander in the solution space got us here. And so, yeah, you definitely need to figure out if it's something people want. There's no doubt about that, but it's actually okay to let your creative mind wander for a little bit. Now, this is definitely this is going to be a particularly counterintuitive one, or controversial one, I should say. Of course, the classic saying is, if you aren't embarrassed, you've shipped too late, right? Reid Hoffman has gone on to clarify this quote, but I think ultimately this really tends to get misused. I think the heart of the idea is that, oh yeah, you want to be lean, you want to keep tight scope, you want to start small, you want to not focus on dumb details. You want to just start learning and get something out the door, rather than trying to perfect it, because that's always going to be elusively in the future. So it makes sense in theory, but I just think the tricky thing is in the fuzziness of the word embarrassed. What really does that mean? And I would actually flip it around and go as far as to say, don't ship it if you're embarrassed. In my opinion, the risk, if you're okay being embarrassed, is that you could potentially be shipping stuff that's just so bad that no one can really use it, and shipping it actually serves no purpose, right? A great, weak cupcake, a gooey cupcake, is shipping something where you're just not really confident it's going to be valuable. You're not sure what you're going to really learn. You're not really proud of it, but you just feel like you need to get it out the door because you're trying to apply this principle. You're trying to err towards getting it out the door rather than hesitating too much about it. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is that just scoping it down doesn't make it a cupcake. It still needs to be edible, of course, and it needs to even taste good, perhaps. It needs to be compelling enough for someone to try it, to change their habits and try it. And there needs to be some baseline value that you expect someone is going to attract from it. And so by definition, in my head, you shouldn't be embarrassed about that. You can be slightly awkward that it's not a wedding cake, perhaps, but you shouldn't be embarrassed that it's not doing. You shouldn't be embarrassed about that because it's doing that one thing really well. So a great story here is from a side project of mine. So I was building an analytics tool for Intercom, and it was one-click way to see some reports on your Intercom data. And we got to a point where it looked like this. This is it looked fine. It was okay. We were a bit awkward about it. I wasn't even going to tell my Intercom colleagues about it because I was kind of embarrassed by it. But I thought, whatever, I got to ship it. I got to learn and keep moving. I don't want to hesitate too much. But I was wrong, right? This is almost a GUI cupcake, because the way the charts worked was really confusing. Like, I never really understood it, and I was not really clear on what I was going to learn either. The users were defined as not being seen in the last, being seen in the last 60 days. Churn was defined as not being seen in the last 90 days. All these kinds of implicit definitions were floating around the app. It was just not really usable. I don't really know what I was planning on learning from it. I felt like I had to get it out the door, but it's silly to have done that in hindsight, because ultimately I had to take a step back and question the data model some more and land on a place that was a bit more usable. And it's of course not a huge success story anyway, still. But the key thing here is that ultimately, if there's whatever you're getting out the door, you need to have reasonable belief that it's going to deliver something of value to someone, and you need to have some clear understanding of what you're going to learn. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about when it comes to that. It may not do much, but it really needs to do something well. Cool. So another classic PM 101 way of thinking, I should say, is thinking that people care about the app that we're working on, right? We think that people care. They have this kind of relationship with the product we're working on. They have affinity with the brand. When we release something, they're going to care to try it out. And of course, the sad reality is that we are spending 5 days a week, 8 hours on it, but that's a focusing illusion. However, how much we think the product is important, it's not the case usually, right? It's the center of our working world, but it's certainly not going to be the center of everyone else's world. They've got lots of other things when it comes to their work and outside of work as well. And the key thing to note here is that when we misunderstand this, we do stuff that just doesn't make sense. We expect people to try and switch over to our product when we ship something. We expect them to invite their teammates when we ask them to, but actually they're going to be awkward about that. We just expect them to care essentially of what we're up to. But the sad thing is, or the harsh reality rather, is that they just have problems. Users just have problems that they're looking to solve, and really the product that we have is just a means to an end to that. And I think a great example here is with my time at Intercom. So we were really, for the longest time, positioning Intercom as this customer communication platform, this interface to all of your interaction and touch points with Intercom, whether it's support or sales, marketing, and so on. And in Intercom, we loved Intercom. We used Intercom for everything, right? It was really the heartbeat of the company. And of course, when it came to talking to some users, in particular, we were talking to sales teams at the time. Hang on, they've got Salesforce, Marketo, Salesloft, LinkedIn. These were the apps that sales teams were running off, and Intercom was kind of just that thing on the side. It was just this web chat thing on the side, and this was to an extent. There are two things here, right? To an extent, it's on us to educate the market and explain, hey, Intercom can be a bigger part of your working life than it is right now. But to an extent, it's also just accepting the reality of all of these other tools and finding a world where we fit into these existing workflows. And we kind of did both. So we deeply integrated with Salesforce and Marketo. We built landing pages specifically for these. We really, really accepted the reality, essentially, of these key foundational level apps. And we also started educating that, hey, we are the messenger that you come to love, but we're also other things. You can do bots and apps and product tools and all those other things with Intercom too. And so it's sort of essentially understanding people's reality and bridging to the world that you do want to make. Now, I do have another product principle, but I'm mindful of leaving some time for questions. So I might just skip over it. Just to wrap up, let me just skip past that. yeah, just to wrap up, I think this is an interesting thing to point out. I came across this tweet from Ben Chu, who's a great product leader, where he was talking about how swinging the pendulum, going from one extreme to another in leadership style, is really one of his most favorite operating principles. And almost days later, I was listening to a podcast from Paul Adams, another great product leader, where he was talking about how you should avoid pendulum swinging. And I just think it's amusing to get that. Of course, there's a lot of context to which these people were sharing these things, but it's just amusing to have two great product leaders almost sharing the opposite things of each other. And I think it sort of is a great way to wrap this up. Nuance is really key. Sometimes we tend to be misapplying the 101 concepts, and sometimes they actually just don't apply to begin with. And ultimately, I think you need to sort of build your judgment of this over time and trust that you do know best. But cool, yeah, happy to take over some questions if there are any.
Excellent, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that presentation because you gave really good, for me personally, really good examples of what you meant in each case. So it really kind of hit home. So thank you for sharing that. And if anybody has any questions out there, please do post them on, again, whichever platform you're using, and I'll put those questions to Amogh. But I'm going to kick it off with a question. And I've got a few here, but actually the pendulum one just struck me at the end there. So I'm going to start with that because I can think of the negative reasons why somebody would be unpredictable and you don't know, are they going to react in different ways? So what's the positive of, what was the explanation that could be a positive for doing the pendulum leadership?
Yeah. So to be honest, I think it's been a while that I empathize and empathize with the other point of view as well. So basically my intuition is sort of to stick with what you're saying and keep things more predictable. But I think the main thing is that you tend to go in cycles as a company, and it's almost like you should accept that you're going to go through cycles as a company, and you should swing the pendulum to acknowledge that. So let me use a concrete example. You will have let's say you have a problem with a project because there were dependencies that weren't in sync, and so you go, these teams need to do a better job at staying in sync. Let's add meetings for these teams to stay in sync more. You'll have meetings to stay in sync, regular catch-up calls, that'll pile up, and then at some point it's going to be actually maybe we can go async with these calls, and then at some point you'll actually stop having calls, and then at some point you're going to have back to square one, have some problem that shows up. And so the way I think of it is that we tend to go in cycles like this, and I think swinging the pendulum is sort of in my head acknowledging that and oscillating to that one extreme to take care of that problem, and then oscillating to the other extreme to take care of that problem, and kind of acknowledging that you're going to have to go back and forth.
There was a great, I can't remember what company said it, but the founder likes to do reorgs as a muscle kind of building experience in the company to kind of every so often when he thinks it's becoming kind of stable, he'll do a reorg to kind of get people used to change and make sure that people aren't kind of getting stuck in a rut, which it's an interesting theory, but yeah, it seems to work for me. The other one, I guess, is just the Echo example that you gave. Amazon have kind of publicly said now that they're struggling to find any way to monetize it, and they're not sure what to do. So it's a technology that's yeah, it's cool, and people want to use it, and it's a good example of people wanting to use it, because sometimes you might build a technology that people don't want, but then they couldn't find a really good monetization. So what's your tactic? Because I remember you saying in your example, okay, let's dig into the problem to make sure we're not just building technology for technology's sake, but how do you look at the business side of it?
Yeah, actually, I want to share my screen again to show my slides. Are you able to put the slides back on quickly?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this actually touches on one of the points that I didn't get to make, but I think ultimately, when we are prioritizing and when we're picking up things, we need to stay grounded on problems. And so I think that almost comes as a caveat for everything. So I think the way I think of it is essentially it's okay to start with the solution. It's okay to think that, oh, there's this strategic opportunity that's interesting for us to look at because there's the new technology that's come and now that's enabling this kind of interesting use case. And like you said, it's interesting. But ultimately, you need to stay grounded on problems. Because those are the least abstract concepts. Everything else is kind of this made-up thing that we create in companies, but problems that people have are just this foundational truth that you discover them, you don't create them. And so, yeah, the short summary, because I'm mindful of time, would just be to say that ultimately you still do need to come to that foundation. And yeah, just starting with the solution there with technology isn't enough.
Excellent. But yeah, so thanks for sharing. You're right, we are just slightly over time actually, but thank you very much for sharing. I really enjoyed that. And if anybody has any other questions, just keep sending them in. And what I'll do is I'll put those to Amogh on the Slack group. So thank you very much, Amogh.
Cool, thank you.
Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our event. I hope you enjoyed it, but if you did, please consider joining us for our upcoming conference in USA, in New York. We'll have 25 speakers, 500 attendees. It's a great chance to get back in person after a few years of working remotely in our spare rooms. So yeah, if you enjoyed the content, it's going to be across product UX design and dev. And that's really how we see helping companies to shift from that project to product team, because there's no point learning separately if you're then expected to work together. So please do consider joining us. But if not, I hope to see you at the next UXDX online session. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.